I would look at, after we get past the opinion, and that is what I would tell you is the most important thing. You pay us to audit your financial records and give you an opinion whether or not they fairly present the county's financial condition. And we've said, yes, you're up to muster with
Page
financial
2, then
report.
what's the next two most important pages?
After that, I would look at the first 6 pages of the financial statements, which is the government-wide statement of net assets, the government-wide statement of activities, which is the modified cash basis, which pulls in the fixed assets and the debt. Then I would look at the cash basis, statement of assets, liabilities, and fund balances, and cash basis statement of revenues and expenditures, which tells you the statement of net assets tells you the overall government financial position, including fixed assets and debt. The statement of assets, liabilities, and fund balance cash basis tells you the cash basis position. The statement of activities tells you the results of your operations for the year, including depreciation. The statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in fund balance tells you the results of your operations on a cash basis. From your daily, monthly management perspective, I think probably those cash basis statements are key, because you budget on a cash basis, your real control is your cash balances. I think it's important to look at the government-wide statements because they do pull in fixed assets and debt, gives you a more complete picture of the overall financial position. So those are, to me, those are the key things, give you an overall picture of the county. If you're concerned about individual funds, there's a boatload of detail back in the back.
The fact that the general fund $630,000 in the hole is probably kind of important for look at, unless I'm reading that wrong.
Yeah, I guess I don't get too concerned about that because you have so many different funds for so many different purposes. So the fact that a given fund may look a little bit funny doesn't concern me. As long as you're
I mean, it should concern us because that's the fund that we manage.
right, that's your general fund. So you know, as you do your budgeting and set your levies and talk about how and when and why you transfer funds, obviously the general fund is a key fund. We want to protect that. But from what's the most important pages? From my perspective, you pay me for the opinion. That's it. And then secondly, it's those front main financials that give you the overall of your financial position as also operations.
I guess I was looking at 3940. Okay.
What is 3940?
I just didn't know if I was looking at the right when we were talking about.
Yeah, that's another really key where you have your budgetary comparison, so you can look at how we did in comparison to our budget. And certainly as you're evaluating your overall financial position, overall results, and thinking about your budgeting, you want to look at how do we actually perform compared to budget. So. Good question. I gotta say it's all important.
Absolutely. I understand.
I wouldn't have 90 pages unless it was all important.
Do you have any other questions regarding the financial statements?
I'm just now looking. Normally, at the very back is the single audit. What's the status?
Yes, should have that page is starting page 80. The compliance report and the CEPA.
Thank you.
Scheduled findings. And the scheduled findings is clean. Nothing to report there as far as any problems.
Okay. Thank you.
Have all the areas, your areas of concern been corrected?
as far as like internal control issues,
Yeah.
things we talked about, okay, are you ready for that?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
ready for
all
that.
right.
As part of our audit, we're required to report to you if we find any internal control deficiencies. Really, we're required to report on two main deficiencies. The first one would be a material weakness. This material weakness is more likely than not that a misstatement could occur and would have a tangible effect on the financial statement. So material weakness is a material weakness in your internal controls that could have a material impact on your financial statements. The second item is what we call a significant deficiency, and that is less material effect on the financial statements, but still is important enough to address. We found neither of those items in our audit for our consideration of internal controls. However, if you do have this listed in the letter of internal controls. So it begins in the planning. It's one of the items we handed out, or Augie had handed out to you. So if you want to follow along. So it starts in the planning and performing of our audit of the financial statements of Edgar County. During our audit, we became aware of items that do not constitute significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, but the suggestions that we have for you would help improve your internal controls and operating effectiveness, efficiency. The first of these is to perform a fraud risk assessment. This process would help you consider the county's weakness or vulnerability to misappropriation of assets. And then we list some items that should be considered there. Number two is the preparation of financial statements and control over financial reporting process. As a part of our audit, the management has requested us to prepare a draft of the financial statements and the related notes to the financial statements. Similar to prior years, we ask the management reviews and approves the responsibility for these financial statements prior to their issuance. In order to provide improved oversight to the financial statements, it is important to establish policies and procedures for the review of those financial statements. And we have those items there listed. Number three is the inventory of non-capitalized items. This suggestion is to help the counties strengthen their controls over property by taking physical counts, especially of removable material items. One item that we tend to look at, or one item that you might consider looking at, is the inventory of laptops. I don't know how many laptops it can, but something that can easily be walked away with, basically something that can is easily misappropriated. Fourth item there is written procedures for each department. It's important to have written policies and procedures accessible to most employees. And we recommend that every department have in writing their cash receipts, expenditures, and basic employee procedures. And finally, the last item there, original invoices should be attached to the claim form. It was noted that copies of original invoices were attached to claim forms and submitted to the county clerk and treasurer's office for payment. Original invoices should be attached to the claim form, as this will prevent the invoice from entering the disbursement system multiple times and to prevent the possibility of alterations in the invoice.
I thought that had been corrected.
I was just gonna ask, remember at the meeting, we said that if it was submitted, then it would be stamped by the county clerk, then the original could go back to those two departments that needed to keep them.
Yes, and we understand that's been implemented
Right.
in the new year.
In the new year.
As
Right.
of November 3rd.
Oh, you're talking about.
Yes,
My
November
apologies.
30th, 2012.
Okay,
And
Yes.
we did discuss that in the pre-planning meeting in January, and so your folks are, you know,
Okay,
trying to get
and
the
I-
system, see if it'll work for us.
so there's a couple of departments that needed to keep their receipts, so we submit them, they're stamped, and then we return, and a copy's kept with the bills so that we can, we know that we're not gonna get duplicates.
Correct.
Correct. But that's, it was implemented starting the first year,
This-
I'm thinking.
There are two items we would want to note that were cleared up or corrected from last year's, or some items that, you know, that you went ahead and implemented. One was the receipt of money from all the public, and that had to do with controls over the cash drawers for various departments. Additionally, attaching credit card receipts with this statement, we noted that we did see credit card receipts attached to credit card statements during our review of receipts and disbursements. Do you have any questions on internal controls?
The 5 issues that are included in this year's letter, once again, we've got 3 different levels of control weakness. This is the least significant, the thing we don't get terribly wound up about. We offer those as suggestions for you and your staff to consider, because you could tighten things up a little bit, but we're not seeing any real issues pop up because of these. These are fairly routine. Virtually all of our government audits, we make these kinds of recommendations.
There's always room for improvement, is what you're saying.
And what, at this point, you know, it's really up to your staff folks to look at the risks of something going wrong or an error occurring and not being caught versus the cost of coming to a plan of correction, and you'll see if it makes sense to do anything different. So we offer those as suggestions in that perspective.
The final item is to go over any required audit communications that we are required to discuss with you. That's in the letter that starts with, we have audited the financial statements, additional letter that so we are required to communicate with you the following information relating to our audit. First item there is that management is responsible for selection and use of the appropriate accounting policies, and those accounting policies used by the county are described in note 1 of the financial statements. There were no new accounting policies adopted, and the application of existing policies had not changed since 2012, or changed during 2012. Financial statements are made up of, in some cases, some estimates. In the county's case, really the only estimate that is part of the financial statements is the recognition of depreciation of property, plant, and equipment. Property and plant and equipment are recorded at the cost and depreciated over the estimated useful life. And of course, we know useful life of this asset is really an estimate. I guarantee the asset will last within that capitalization policy. And those useful lives are described in, also in note 1 to the financial statement. We just encountered no difficulties in performing the audit, had no problems dealing with management in performing or completing our audit. We had no disagreements with management, and we found that management had not consulted with any other independent accountants. Do you have any questions over those items?
covers our report unless you have.
Any other questions or comments for them?
I guess I went and stepped out of the room. Why did you call this preliminary draft?
A couple of reasons. One is we wanted to give Augie and Don a chance to look at everything and make sure that they're in agreement. And secondly, we're still waiting on final response. I think we've got maybe the attorney responses as of last night. We haven't had a chance to really digest those. So there's always the possibility that the attorney will tell us something about legal action that would need to be disclosed. So that's why it's in a draft format. Once Don and Augie have had a chance to look at it and we digest the attorney responses, we'll finalize everything. If anything at all changes, of course, we will tell you exactly what has changed and why.
And I can't speak for Augie, but I would encourage all the board members to sit in their recliner and review some of this stuff, because, I mean, something may jump off the page, get you off guard when we just don't notice it. More eyes is the better for this, so.
And not in a recliner.
Yeah, I'll look.
Give the recliner, put
We
it
don't
in a
write
glass
that
of
well.
warm milk, it'll take you about 10 minutes.
Anything else? If not, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. We'll excuse ourselves.
You can excuse yourself.
They didn't take any action on this.
We'll be in touch as soon as we finalize.
Okay, item number 11. Authorization for the settlement of civil action and execution of GIE release. Does everybody know what that is?
Go ahead.
Okay. The state's attorney asked me to put this on the agenda. This is a follow-up from the settlement that the county just did with the Stidle case. And this is for $15,000 from the insurance company, GIE. And it's basically the same type of authorization and agreement that we signed with the other.
Yes, that was because of, as Mark described, this was a come lately deal because that particular insurance company had been asked now, since that court ruling was that when the actual harm came to an individual, and they were just starting to get fired up, and so in order to settle, they wanted a release on the 15th.
And he said that when he comes down for closed session, he will have the actual document to sign.
You want roll call?
We would need a roll call on this, yes.
Okay, we'll need a roll call.
I move to authorize the settlement of civil action and execution of GIE release.
Motion by Jeff, wait a second.
Second.
Second by Alan. Now roll call.
Voigt,
Yes.
Zuber,
Yes.
Bruner,
Yes.
Farnham,
Yes.
Helsley,
Present.
Jennings.
Yes.
Item number 12. The resignation of Sherilyn Kramer as the assistant coordinator effective May 31st, 2013. I guess we need a motion to accept her letter of resignation.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mike, here second by Ben. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Sorry, Peter. Wilson. Item number 13, approved contract with Illinois FOP Labor Council for jailers and dispatchers.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, that's fine. We have reached an agreement and the union has ratified the agreement that we've reached with the dispatchers and jailers. We have all reviewed it. The sheriff has reviewed it and gone back and forth, and this final copy is what we've come up with. I guess what I want to say, we talked about it a little bit on Monday, but some of the key issues obviously revolved around insurance, wages, what do you, meals in the comp time, not comp time, but
On the weekends.
right.
What was that?
No, a differential in pay
Differential
for,
pay for
for
weekend
working
pay.
certain things. We came to, I think, a good agreement with them, and I would move the approval of this contract that's been ratified by the dispatchers and jailers.
Got a motion by Mr. Boyd, second by Mr. Farnum.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair, I was gonna say that, how long is this for?
3-year contract.
And you, who are the committee members on that?
Ben, myself, and Jeff.
And you all three think it's a good deal?
Yes.
I think it's the best deal we could do.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah.
Okay, I just, all right, I trust
That's true.
And this is retro back to December 1?
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, for they've been working the last 4 or 5 months with no contract.
So Vicki is gonna have to do the
3
adjustments and everything, okay?
Any other questions, comments? If not, we'll take a roll call vote on the motion.
Voigt,
Yes.
Zuber,
Yes.
Bruner,
Yes.
Farnum,
Yes.
Helmsley,
Yes.
Jennings.
Yes.
Okay, item 14, take action on airport commercial operator contract.
Mr. Chairman, we met, the airport advisory committee met last night and discussed the contract, and it was the opinion of the advisory board that we not have a business in the main hangar of the airport. And since we don't have a business in the main hangar of the airport, and I'm recommending that they don't ever have a business in there, that they thought in their motion also that it was not necessary to have a contract for a business in the main hangar. And so that'd be the motion that I would say, that I would make for the county board to approve.
What was the vote?
The vote was 4-2 and 1 abstention. 4 to approve that, and 2 against it, and 1 abstention.
So if this motion passes, what happens to the motion that was made 2 months ago? With the business
Yeah, this is,
with RSB Aviation, is that still in effect, or is this negate that? Or should that be something the state's attorney might make opinion on? Because we had a motion that passed 2 months ago to work out a, let me finish.
okay.
To work out a business lease, not with RSB Aviation, to use the hangar as a business. So is that motion
Yeah,
no longer?
It was a motion, right? It was a motion to have a contract for the main hangar.
With RSB Aviation? Right, am I correct? Augie, do you have that motion that was made?
Well, I don't have it with me, but my best recollection,
It was specifically
For
with RSB, yes.
Yes.
To conduct business in the hangar.
Yes.
So does this motion negate that motion, or
Yes,
is
it
that
would.
motion still in effect?
Yes, it would.
His opinion?
Hmm?
That's only your opinion?
Well, that would be the motion that we're going to pass now,
So what
or not
happens
pass.
when that
I think
is-
what Dan's saying is that the motion directed the committees, meaning the airport committee and the advisory committee, to come up with a contract. And that has not been fulfilled.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
I think that's what he's saying.
All right.
And I'm saying that it has been by the fact that they're saying that they no longer see a reason to have a business there, so how would you have a contract for a business that's not there?
Does the motion that was passed last night delineate that the airport will not have, how does the actual what does it actually say? In other words, does it say the entire airport, just the hangar?
It's the main hangar.
It was specifically the main hangar.
Right.
So it's, as far as a commercial business, like
There's
if,
no problem with commercial business building a building there, assuming that they get a lease with the county for ground to do it, right?
okay, and if this summer, when fertilizer companies come in with prop dusters,
Right, that'd be nothing to do with
that has nothing to do with what you guys
Main
passed
hangar,
last.
right.
It's, so if they are not in the main hangar, operating out on the runway or
It has
whatever.
nothing to do with that, right?
Okay, all right.
So if this motion passes, then we should be able to reduce the staff at the airport, right? Because you will not have the same amount of traffic. So we shouldn't need a secretary and probably reduce.
Well, that's an assumption.
Well, I'm assuming.
Yes, and that'd also be
Everything else.
up to them.
I mean, common sense would tell you if you don't have a business at the hangar, you're not gonna have the same amount of traffic on the runways, right? Therefore, you would not need the same staff.
Is there anything in the federal or state issues of grants and agreements that we have that this would violate?
No. All of the requirements by state and federal participation money are being and have been met. It is an open public airport, open to the general aviation public. I will interject a little bit. You're talking, and revert back to the motion. I do respect what Mr. Henry said. But the motion to write a contract had a deadline on that motion. That deadline was not met. It was given another deadline. That deadline was not met.
What was the
It
second
can't-
deadline? Pardon me, but I don't want to interrupt you, but same token, the one deadline was not met, and the board decided to extend the deadline. The lease, business lease that was made by the three subcommittees had it done by March the 18th. The deadline was this meeting, so the business lease was done by March the 18th.
That business
It
lease,
just wasn't turned in to anybody. Because Ben wanted to go through a different sequence of people looking at it, which the committee disagreed with.
I want to go through the sequence that the county board agreed to.
No,
No.
the county board didn't know nothing about the sequence,
yes, the county board did.
except for
The
a
county-
workshop.
The county, it was to come to the county board at the meeting that we have, at the highway office, and at the study session, and then it was to go to the state's attorney. And the last I knew, it hadn't even gotten the written quotes from the insurance company. So,
But the second
It was
deadline
not.
was today. The lease was done by March the 18th.
the recommendation of the airport committee is not to have a commercial operation in the main hangar. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you have made a motion.
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Mr. Helsley seconds it. Is there any other discussion?
Yes, from the financial standpoint, this is a major, major deal, and we've switched directions. Of course, I'm always looking for income for the county. I'm concerned that we're rushing into something that is not probably that well thought out. It hasn't been discussed for 2 months. It's only just been discussed this week. And I don't think that's a fair airing of something as important as that. It's gonna cut about $10,000 worth of income out of the budget. I think this board is charged with the responsibility of developing.
Hangar is still
I've had the floor.
Hangar's still rented, would be rented. So the dollar amount would be the same.
Do we have it, is there somebody in the wings that wants to rent it right this minute?
No, I'd have to say no.
Okay, I have the floor, Ben. The other thing, now, my train of thought. We are charged with the economic development of this county as one of our jobs. I'm not saying that this isn't right, but I think for something as fair and as important as this, we ought to give it the attention it deserves from the economic standpoint, not as a way to backdoor other decisions. That's all I got to say.
Now, if the hangar is rented by somebody else, do they have to have the same amount of insurance, which would be $1 million liability? Because last night you were talking about protecting the county. So they will be required to have the same exact type of insurance and will pay the same rent for the main hangar.
Well, that depends on what they're doing. If they're not,
Well, it might make a difference. I mean, if they bring a plane in and somebody's working on the airplane, the chances the airplane blows up and burns down a hangar is the same as where you have a business in there or a single airplane. So they should have the same amount of insurance, right?
well, what if the guys in the T hangar are working on airplanes?
I don't know about T hangar. All we're talking about is the main hangar. We ain't talking nothing about T hangar. This is only the main hangar. So it should be required to have the
So
same
there's
amount
no
of
difference,
insurance,
so,
right?
well, I'm not, I see where you're going and I understand why you're doing it. My question is there a difference between somebody storing an airplane in there and occasionally working on it, changing the oil, or is there a difference between somebody utilizing that main hangar for a business, where they do other customers' planes, they do, light manufacturing or whatever?
But they're doing the same thing. I mean, they're still working on the airplane, still have the same chance of the airplane blowing up, whether it's a business working on the airplane or an individual working
Well,
on the
an
airplane.
answer to the question might be arrived at by asking the insurance company,
Okay.
our insurance carrier, what they see
Right.
as a liability and as an issue, if they think there's as much risk.
Yeah, talked
I
to
would
them.
think that a licensed mechanic by the federal government might be just a little bit more acceptable to an insurance company than somebody that's just kind of free-handing it on an airplane. I'm just guessing.
I have talked to Diamond Brothers, and they actually indicated the type of insurance, the amount that the person using that hangar should have. I mean, they referred to a company, but maybe not to an individual, but they may say it should be the same. So if somebody brings an airplane in and spends a week working on it, the chances of they're gonna have an accident would be the same as if somebody, a company that has an airplane working on it, because they're gonna do the same thing, right?
Well, here's an example of where we don't have some answers. This is
That would be something that the advisory board should take up.
well, I'm just saying, we're rushing into a decision here that's going to affect us a long time.
From January to April may seem like a rush to you, Jeff, but it isn't a rush.
I'm talking about that motion. I call the vote.
I will test. Do you want?
You have a first and a second.
And we have first, is there any other discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call vote.
Would you read the motion one more time?
The motion is to, the recommendation, have you got it there or do you want me to?
Well, Ben was talking about, and he said that he recommends, that the board recommends that there not be any commercial business in the main hangar.
Yes.
Is the way I understood your motion.
Okay.
Is that your motion?
That's the motion that from the advisory board, yes.
The recommendation from the advisory.
That there not be a commercial operation
Commercial operation, right?
Commercial operation.
in the main hangar.
In the main hangar. You want to read it again and make sure we've got it
Still
right?
didn't answer my question, but first motion made.
The recommendation from the advisory board, airport advisory board, that there be no commercial operation in the main hangar. I mean, I can dress it up, at the airport.
And the vote will be to take the advisory board or rather the airport committee's recommendation. So everybody understands how the vote is.
Now, wait a minute.
Yeah.
It was the advisory board that made it. not the airport committee.
It's, but it is the recommendation of the airport committee. Ben is the chairman of the airport committee.
Okay,
It's coming to the board through the committee.
okay, that's what makes.
I understand. I just wanted to clarify it so
Yeah.
we had it down right.
And the motion is to whether or not to take their recommendation. Roll call.
Voigt,
No.
Zuber,
No.
Bruner,
No.
Farnum,
No.
Helsley,
Yes.
Janice.
Yes.
4-2.
Motion fails.
I move that the board direct the committee of this board for the airport and the advisory board to go back and readdress the original motion, to carry that out so we can vote on that here. And in the meantime, to collect back rent and to collect on a month-to-month basis so that we can do our fiduciary duty and collect rent for something that's actually done. Okay?
All in one motion?
That is not on the agenda.
It is too.
Yes, it is.
It is too, as it
Action on
says.
the airport commercial operator contract.
And we're redirecting it back to the committee. I stand by my motion, Mr. Chairman.
I second.
Until this is resolved, we should be collecting for the taxpayers' money, and we should direct that they bring back a motion or a contract to deal with. That was the original motion.
You also have a motion out there that they do not have any